Okay, I think we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have the pleasure to introduce Joanne Sonenshine. I hope I am pronouncing your last name well. If not, you can correct me later. Well, she's the CEO of Connective Impact. It is a collaboration advisory firm based in Washington, D.C. And she's also author of Change Seekers, Finding Your Path to Impact, a book about seeking fulfillment and making a difference to improve the planet. She has a passion for sustainable development. This has led her to roles within the U.S. Department of Commerce International Trade Association. She has worked as a lobbyist advocating for more comprehensive environmental sustainability regulations in a program, and she was also a program director at a large international NGO. She also serves on the board of Emerging Leaders, an Oxford, UK-based NGO training, and they train leaders in vulnerable communities in sub-Saharan Africa and India. So she has done a lot of things, very interesting things, and now with Connective Impact, she advises organizations to address social, environmental, and economic development challenges. She does this through partnership building, so she's an expert in building partnerships. So if you're looking to understand more how to manage your partnerships, this webinar is for you. So I'm gonna give it to Joanne so she can introduce herself. She can tell us a little bit more about her company, about her experience, about her about what she's going to share with us during the webinar. So please, Joanne, this webinar is for you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and hello, everyone. Thanks so much to WeConnect for having me here today, and I hope the material that I cover is useful to each of you. If you have any questions or feedback, we'll have some time at the end of the webinar to address those questions, and of course, I'll leave my contact information in case you do have any specific questions or comments that aren't addressed today. Today, I'll be discussing the concept of collaboration, and I thank you, Andrea, for that very kind introduction. It's really a passion of mine to think about partnerships, but also how to evaluate how organizations are thinking through collaboration. It's something we hear quite a bit about, but we're often not given the tools to do partnering effectively, and that was one of the challenges that I faced in my background, my career. And it made me think through what's kind of the most effective way to make partnerships actually impactful, which is what led me to start Connective Impact. So we'll get into that a little bit today. We'll talk about how you evaluate your existing partnerships so that you do have the greatest opportunity for growth together in that partnership, and also how to bring others in so that your collaboration can be really multifaceted. So I'll cover the methods that I use with my clients. I'll share what I've seen work well for nonprofits, companies, social enterprises, and even government agencies as they evaluate existing partnerships and consider new ones. So just quickly, my company, I think Andrea kind of got to this point, but my company is called Connective Impact. We're a partnership strategy advisory firm. We're just based outside of Washington and Arlington. So we really are connectors. We help organizations find each other in order to address goals that they've set around environmental, social, and economic impact. And ultimately, our biggest goal is to shift the paradigm where companies, nonprofits, and governments have been working on their own. So it's really this idea of how do we bring organizations together to work more efficiently. I founded Connective Impact in 2014, and I won't kind of review what Andrea said, but I did spend time working in the government. I was a lobbyist for a period of time, and I led program design and delivery with food, agriculture, consumer goods, and apparel companies for an international nonprofit based here in Washington. And, you know, I learned that organizational success and goal development is really contingent on finding the right collaborators. And really, it's a relationship building exercise, right? I mean, partnership is only going to be as effective as the relationships that you build. So to identify the most beneficial partners, that relationship building and connection creation is so critical when you're sitting at a negotiating table, thinking about the program recipients and kind of understanding how do we speak on their behalf. It's really challenging, and you often find that the recipients of some of the partnerships that I'll cover today aren't often given a voice. And that's a real priority for me in thinking about partnership strategy. Developing an effective partnership strategy and delivering on organizational goals, it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. So you'll see more of what I mean by that today. And then just quick note on my book, I wrote my first book last year. It's about the journey that I've taken to find a career that makes a difference, but I also include the stories of some pretty remarkable leaders who have really shifted their own thinking to make a difference in their roles. So just a quick plug on that. So we'll go into greater depth on this process, but just to give you an overview of the methodology we've been using over the last 4 years, these are the 6 simple steps that really any organization can take to make their partnership building, their strategy development, even consensus building internally. We've done this for career development. We've done this for priority setting, as an internal exercise. It's really about thinking through what those priorities need to be, where partnership is gonna help drive a strategy forward or keep goals on track. So we'll talk more in detail about that as we go. So just a bit of context, why do organizations even need to partner? So for those of you not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 specific goals, total of 169 targets that have been identified by the United Nations as critical to transform our world, in other words, towards achieving full and lasting prosperity by 2030. Many of these targets are incredibly aggressive, like improving hunger or education. They just cannot be addressed alone. So I often think about the SDGs as our biggest challenge in thinking through partnerships. In the past, partnerships were often formed to address risks only if they were getting in the way of company profits or prevented a company from following a government regulation, for example. In some cases, there would be nonprofits who might protest a company or an entity because they wanted to see change happen, and so they would cause kind of an uproar over an issue like maybe pollution or wastewater. But it really wasn't until the early 1990s that this idea of partnering for mutual benefit kind of came to be, and it's evolved quite a bit since then. So collaboration is really the new normal. And today we're moving into this notion that in order to be really effective, to look at things like profit and purpose simultaneously, there does need to be a collective way of approaching partnering. The evolution of the B Corp movement is also something that I think is propelling us forward in terms of how we work together. Those companies that are quite keen on being part of the B Corp movement recognize they do need help. They can't achieve some of those far-reaching goals that, allow them to be part of the B Corp movement alone. So just a quick question for any of you who follow the trajectory of partnerships. I'm wondering if anyone here knows what happened in 1991. There was a company that was kind of pressured to make a decision about, I'll give you a little hint, about packaging that really started to transform this notion of CSR. And it was McDonald's. So in 1991, the Environmental Defense Fund started pressuring McDonald's around this notion of using their clamshell packaging. And what McDonald's decided to do was, instead of just be defensive and push EDF away, they actually agreed to partner with EDF, and they created a new packaging system which helped eliminate more than 300 pounds of packaging over the next 10 years. So ironically, this also saved them $6 million per year. So there was this kind of profit potential that came from a purpose-oriented effort in partnership. And it's coincidental because, was it last week, I think, McDonald's just launched an even bigger overhaul of their packaging, which is going to save, probably even million pounds of packaging in terms of what they put in their waste stream over the next 10 years. So how do we build on this? And I want to show you a quick video that I think shows this notion of partnering in such kind of a triple bottom line way. So hopefully this works. Hold on, I was going to try to expand it. So it just occurred to me that I hope that that you have heard this. I can't tell if you were able to hear the video. So Andrea, is there a way for you to tell me whether or not that was something you actually could hear?
No, we cannot hear the sound of the video, and it's probably, can you hear the sound of it?
I can hear the sound of it.
Something with WebEx.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just give you a background on the video, and then I can send it around separately. It's a video that shows a relationship between Unilever, the consumer products company, that partnered with a nonprofit called PSI around a hand washing campaign. And there was a kind of an awareness brought to the attention of Unilever by PSI that a lot of children were kind of skipping the process of washing their hands before and after meals at school, certainly at home. And in large part, that was just, there was no accessibility to soap. And so because of that, there was a spreading of disease, and it was obviously a sanitation hazard. So what Unilever and PSI identified together across several countries is this notion of how can we supply low-cost soap that has real potential to combat that sanitation hazard, while also helping to kind of promote the brand, the Lifebuoy soap brand. So what this ended up doing was, Unilever spent a lot of money on education, consumer awareness, providing soap, low-cost soap. PSI was their partner in that effort, making sure they got to the right communities. And in kind of conjunction with all of that engagement with local communities, decision makers, governments, schools, et cetera, there was this kind of new robust market that Unilever was able to tap into as a company. So, at the end of the day, a company needs to make money. You can't deny that that's why they exist. They sell products. And hopefully those products are being sold to both provide a service, but also to help people make their lives better. And that's exactly what this Lifebuoy notion was all about, was how do we provide soap that's low cost and accessible, creates a new market for Unilever, but also does a whole lot of good. So, to me, that's a perfect example of the status of partnering around sustainable development goals. There are a lot of challenges that we face currently around issues like climate and access to clean water, health, gender equity, and frankly, only in working in partnership are we going to be able to address those. And I just think this Unilever example is such a great one. So let me just move on, talk a little bit about the type of partnerships that we build with our clients. It might kind of give you some inspiration for some of the things that you're thinking through in your organization. We hear from companies really of all sizes and types that partnering can take a lot of time and that it's hard to find the right partner. Particularly within nonprofits, there's kind of this notion of, well, they're all competing for our money. We don't want to spend the time having to kind of go through their very technical language. We just want it to be easy. It's easier for us in some cases just to work alone with our suppliers. And so finding the right partner with kind of mutual interest can be time consuming and costly. And what we'll often tell our clients is it doesn't have to be like that. So, whereas in the past it might be that a company would give money philanthropically, or maybe for technical assistance or some sort of service provision, now we're seeing that companies can recognize if they embed a service provider, a nonprofit, a partner in their business, in their operations, and in their risk management, it actually has greater benefit for the company because it allows their costs to be kind of more streamlined. It becomes an operational cost, and it saves them money on the back end. I mean, certain things like working with farmers on better farming methods or streamlining access to medicines for stakeholders that eventually are consumers or employees in a factory, for example. I mean, a lot of those service kind of provision roles come from the nonprofit world or social enterprise. And companies are realizing if they can tap into that expertise and the social enterprise and the nonprofit can tap into kind of the supply chain logistics that a company offers, there's mutual benefit. So these are the type of conversations that we're having quite often. Another client of ours asked us to help kind of redefine their priorities across 5 continents. They've got hundreds of staff, and they recognize that in order to bring in the strategic partnerships that they were looking for, including funding, they were going to have to be much more targeted in their fundraising and strategic partnership building. So the 6-step process, which I'm going to take you through in a minute, we actually were able to narrow in on like the hundreds of goals that this company has set. We were able to narrow in on 5 and be much more targeted in how we sought partners to address those 5 areas of interest instead of hundreds. And I'll talk a little bit about how that happens in a minute. So I mean, I guess the question is, okay, how does your organization then begin evaluating partnerships, the partnership process? How do you incorporate partnership strategies into your internal goal development and future planning? So this approach that we are working on in various iterations time and time again is meant to be streamlined, and it's meant to connect your organization with others that are going to be kind of at the comparative advantage, are able to help you address gaps that you have. So partnership is critical, but it's only critical if you do have the need for it. So the question is kind of how do you define it? So step 1 is you need to better understand the reality under which your organizational goals are achievable alone versus where partnerships have the best opportunity to make goals more attainable. We do this by prioritizing your organizational goals and objectives. What we do is we end up spending some time kind of as a pre-step, understanding from 10 to 12, usually we look to 10 to 12 decision makers in an organization and ask them simple questions like, what's working well? Where are there opportunities that, we might want to tap into where things haven't been working so well? What are some of the current challenges that you face? Where do you see competitors playing a bigger role where you think you should be playing that role? So once we have a sense of the answers to some of those questions, we can start to understand where there's real need, where there's kind of things that are working well, let's set those aside. Later, we'll want to think about replicating what's working well, but in the meantime, let's kind of fill in the gaps where there might be some need here. Now, just a quick point, when we're talking to some of those decision makers in an organization to understand where there are opportunities for partnership, usually we use just a real basic kind of phone survey, phone interview, but you could also bring in an external facilitator or have a board member or staff person kind of go through this series of questions. The reason I recommend this is because having real, honest, unbiased answers to some of the questions like what's working well, where are there opportunities for improvement is so important. You don't want to waste your time kind of with touchy-feely language. You want it to be really honest so that you can move right into the solution stage. I found if I kind of jump right in and just, ask questions about like, I need to know what's not working, it's so much better for our time together than if I'm kind of talking around that issue. So oftentimes interviewing these leaders to get this information, it needs to happen in a bit of a vacuum, or else if they're around some of their colleagues, they might not speak as honestly. So step 2, once you've kind of identified which elements of your operational goal, commitment, strategy element is kind of struggling a little bit, where there's an opportunity to fill in a gap, that's where we start thinking about partnerships. We also think about partnerships when it comes to opportunities for scale. So whereas I mentioned before, you might have some pretty big scenarios where things are working well. That's great. So let's think about how we want to replicate those. But for example, if the goal is fundraising, the universe of partners is going to look a little different than if the goal is around project implementation. So we go through a process of figuring out who are the potential strategic partners that we even need to engage in this process, and kind of narrow in before we start doing the outreach and the partnership identification. So once you have kind of a sense of, okay, we know that we need funding, or we know that we're looking to replicate this program in 3 different countries, or we're really just looking for thought leadership partners, whatever that we know we need, blank, 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 then you can start honing in on, okay, how do we find those partners? If it's we need funding, let's obviously start looking at funding categories. If it's we need thought leadership, let's look at the accelerators or the academics. The process of connecting is so based on networking and relationship building. And, I probably don't need to tell all of you on the line how critical that is in getting the word out there that you are quite interested in finding the right partners. Obviously, the role we play at Connective Impact is making that connection on behalf of our clients where our network can be beneficial to a client. But this is very easy to do on your own as well. And it's just about kind of understanding the landscape of what's out there and who's going to help you achieve your goal, thinking a little bit also about how you can help them achieve theirs. And this idea of kind of mutual benefit will come up over and over again. The key to finding the right match is really being specific with your ask. So if you are identifying partners that you want funding from, you need to make sure that in your conversations you are clear, we're looking for funding, because you don't want to waste their time. You don't want to waste your time. If a foundation or a government donor, they're just not able to give you funding, now is not the time to have that conversation with them. You move on to the next one. So think a little bit about what services you're looking for, what skill sets, what delivery you're in need of before you prioritize your asks. This slide just shows you a little bit about how do you actually kind of make the right match or reach out. Email, LinkedIn, conferences, face-to-face meetings, sending out surveys to prospective partners to get a sense of what maybe some of those prospective partners are in need of that you can provide them in exchange for engaging with you. A connector like Connective Impact, of course, and then maybe you've been hosting a convening. I've seen this work really well where organizations will host a whole bunch of potential partners at their organization to kind of share, here's where our goals lie, here's what we're trying to do over the next 3 to 5 years. Let us know if this is something you want to be a part of. So once you've identified your partners that are willing to work with you on your goals, which, I mean, it can take time, but if you're targeted and you do all of those things I just mentioned, it'll save you quite a bit of time than if you're just kind of willy-nilly, wondering who's out there that's going to be helpful to you. Creating a timeline for mutual efforts, mutual goal development with really clear roles and responsibilities is critical. So this idea of kind of developing the partnership together, being mindful of, is there leadership buy-in? Is there a communicator? What's the communication that we're going to use to talk about this partnership together? What's the role of the implementer versus the funder versus the thought leader versus the advocate? Before you even get started working together, kind of laying all this out, timeline, budget, it's going to be really helpful as you track the process and progress of an effective partnership, because evaluating all of these things, whether you're reaching your goal, whether you're staying on your timeline, whether you're, staying on your budget, will help you determine whether the partnership is actually effective or not. And then kind of to that point, once your partnership has initiated, you're kind of in the process of doing whatever work together that you've established, making sure that over the period of the next kind of 6 to 18 months, you are refining, you're evaluating, how things are going, you're making tweaks if needed, you're communicating not just with each other, but within your own organization so that, leadership within your organization knows what's going on and can speak to successes or challenges, that you've got clear communication protocol externally in case there's a need to bring others in, because all of what I've just said could also be very relevant for a multilateral partnership, not just a bilateral partnership. One other point, this notion of return on investment comes up quite a bit. So the M&E system should also make sure that you're getting a real return on your investment in whether it's impact, a goal, some sort of deliverable. You want to make sure that you're getting that return. So, evaluating the efficacy of a partnership is important. It's often overlooked. So I just want to mention on our website, we've created a questionnaire that you can use that goes through questions like I mentioned. Do you have leadership buy-in? Do you have roles and responsibilities that are very clear? What's your mutual goal? Have you established that? You can use it for any partnership. You can use it over and over again. It allows you to kind of rank your partnership in terms of what is successful in the population of those who have taken the questionnaire. It also gives you recommendations. So if the question is, do you have leadership buy-in? And the answer is no. Once you kind of click on that no, there's a recommendation of how do you get your leadership involved. So I just recommend for anyone on the call that is interested in kind of going through that, it's a great exercise. It gets you practicing to kind of take a look at your existing partnerships to make sure that they really are effective. It also allows you to take a potential new partner through the questions to make sure that you're designing the partnership so that when you are reporting on it or monitoring, you actually are doing so effectively. And here are just a couple more of the questions that we ask. There's about, I think, 22 questions in total. So another just free resource that you're really welcome to use on our website. So if you've kind of evaluated whether a potential partner is worth kind of engaging with, you want to get started through this 6-step process on your own, we've created a video course. It's rudimentary, but it includes all of the tools that we use with our clients. There's 5 2 to 3 minute videos that just kind of walk you through this very high level notion of when I'm going through the priority setting process, here are some questions I need to ask my leaders. When I'm identifying partners, here's how I can categorize them. So there's templates that you can download and use on your own. And you do get some time with Connective Impact staff if you sign up for the course and you want to just kind of walk through a couple of ideas. That's very much an option. And then lastly, for anyone that's here in DC, I'll be holding a workshop on April 5th from 9:30 to 11. We'll walk through this process in much greater detail. You'll get the templates to take back, and more information on that is on our website. Oh, and then I just wanted to show a sample of some of the organizations that we've been working with and open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. That was very interesting. We have some minutes to go through questions. The way you can ask your questions is through the Q&A box. You will find it in your platform, and also through the chat box. Feel free to write all the questions you may have, and Joanne will be happy to answer them. Let's give everybody some time.
just go back to the slide where the 6 steps are up there, just so you have it as you're thinking through whether there's any questions.
Yeah. We have a question. It says, can you remove any practical model to measure the social impact?
Can you say that one more time, Andrea? Sorry.
Recommend. I didn't know.
Can I recommend? Say that again.
Yeah. Can you recommend any practical model to measure the social impact?
Oh, so kind of an M&E model. Yeah, that's monitoring and evaluation is tricky because you can be very, very simple in how you're measuring impact. In fact, if you go on our website, we've got a very simple M&E framework that we say you could kind of start with, which is looking as simple as like how many communities have you engaged, or how many conversations has the partnership led to with other agencies, or there's kind of the macro level. Do you want to just look at numbers of workshops or numbers of communities or numbers of people involved, all the way down to measuring things like some of my clients are working on living income for smallholder farmers. How do we look to see that a partnership has actually added incremental income to a farmer when, a farmer is not really, it's not appropriate to be asking a farmer how much money they make every season, right? Just like you don't talk about your salary. So, it's tough, and there's a lot of organizations out there who are doing amazing work on monitoring and evaluation. Mercy Corps is an NGO I often refer to because I just think they're so comprehensive in how they look at social impact. They've got some open source monitoring frameworks, which I can certainly share for whoever asked the question. Feel free to reach out and I can try to get you connected to them. And also just, look on my website. connectiveimpact.com/downloads, I believe, is the direct link to the downloadable templates, and there's just kind of a rudimentary M&E framework you can start from.
Great, thank you. I don't know if we have any other questions. Please feel free to, now is the moment. I do have a question, Joanne. So most of us working, with NGOs and nonprofit organizations and trying to achieve, a sustainable impact. Sometimes it's difficult to evaluate, the partnerships you want to get into, and you have provided a very interesting, steps to kind of guide you in determining if that partner is something that you should do or not. But more like at the beginning, when you're just evaluating, what would be, the general recommendations when you're considering? Sometimes it's very, obvious to make a partnership, but sometimes there are hidden things and little, sometimes you get this feeling that maybe that partnership is not that convenient. What would you recommend to, more than, if you're sharing spaces, or if you're, what would be the things that are very crucial in determining who to partner with?
Yeah. So having the intent to partner is the first step. Any organization that knows that it's got very high-reaching aims or goals, or has a strategy in place that is comprehensive and is meaty, and they're not going to be able to solve all the problems that are laid out in their goal development on their own. That's the first step. Once the intent is there, what we do is we go through this priority setting or kind of refining organizational goals step. And this is where we engage preferably the decision makers within an organization, leadership, to get a sense of, when you're talking about a specific goal, a company, let's say, has said we're going to buy, $5 million worth of product from 50,000 women in 5 years. That's a really important goal that they've set, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be very easy for them to identify the right partners to do so. So what we'll do is understand, okay, within that goal, what have you already been able to achieve? And if that company says, well, we've already got a sense of where we can get half of that, it's really the other half that we're struggling with. Okay, so now we know that the partnerships really have to look at that remaining second half. So let's put aside what's kind of already been addressed or what's working well, and let's just look at that remaining $2.5 million, 2.5 million women, whatever it is. And then from there, let's try to understand kind of across leadership, where do they see opportunity? Where do they want to be able to engage partners? Where do they see that internally, ABC issues are working fine? It's really XYZ that is struggling a little bit. So we kind of in stepwise approaches put aside where things are working quite fine on their own and really only look at where there's still a bit of a challenge, where we know that partnerships are going to be helpful. And I mean, I would argue any issue can be benefited by a partnership. Even an internal strategy issue might be that you need an outside consultant to come in or something like that. So from there, this question approach of kind of going through these questions, and again, those questions are on our website, the priority setting questions, to understand how do we rank what that need is in specifics, and then identify the partners from there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you so much. I don't think we have additional questions. You can always follow up with Joanne. I think she shared her email in the last, So feel free to reach out. There you go.
There you go.
Yes. So please don't hesitate to reach out, send an email if you would like to continue this conversation, and stay tuned for more webinars like this one. I would like to thank you, Joanne, for your time and your great insights and information, and congratulations for all the expertise you have, and good luck with your company. It does great things, so I hope you can continue to grow. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.